Good evening, everyone. Let me share the screen for today's session and then we can go forward. Yeah, in today's session, we are going to be looking at two case studies under the Integrated Business Solutions paper. Uh, let's, without much ado, go into the first case and then we will take a short break and then take up the second case. Right, that's going to be the format for today. Uh, Anyone has any questions, they can post on the chat box or and then I will come back later during the day with some answers. Every case study also has some questions and MCQs where I will look for some inputs from all of you. Let's start with the first case study. This is the case study of an IT company. So basically, this is insights from Cloudsoft's global rise, how it became a global company and what strategy it took and what kind of growth and what kind of issues it had to face in that process. That's what we are going to be looking at. So this was a company which, much like many of the software product companies, which were largely US centric. This was an India-based company which grew like that, right, from India to be a global products, IT products provider. So essentially, they were building a global software enterprise from India. So the Clouds of Inc. head had said, you don't need to be in Silicon Valley to build a global product. That was his viewpoint, and that's how this happened. As we all know, quite a lot of the resources which are there in even the product companies in US are essentially from Indian background. So there is that talent pool which is available. It is only the question of right direction and moving in the right path to reach where we need to reach from this perspective. Okay. So with that background, let's see from an integrated business solution what are we looking at. Now this paper actually is giving you an insight as to how in actual scenarios business operates. Now you have been studying various subjects independently, but many a times the decision making is based on a multifaceted requirement. There is a need to look at the issue at hand in a holistic manner, get perspectives from various angles, be it from strategic management perspective, be it its implication on accounting and financial reporting, what could be the taxation implication. Now, from a audit angle, what needs to be looked at, governance, various corporate law requirements, and if it is international, there could be things like FEMA, there could be things like other countries' regulations which may be there. Then, if it's a listed company, you also have SEBI regulatory requirements. With all this, you also have to look at cost and performance management. So there are so many factors which needs to be considered in taking a decision. And when I say taxation, it is not only direct taxation, but also indirect taxation, which, by the way, is becoming more and more important in decision making. So, if you look at the global software industry, the size is expected to be around $500 billion and more. $500 billion and more, not ordinary sums, right? So it's a huge, huge, huge amount which is being talked about. Then, if you look at it, the key geographic markets in this, the biggest market today is North America, still, right? It is the biggest market by whatever size you look at. Europe is the second largest market, and then the Asia Pacific or APAC, as it's called, right? So these are the three segments where it is significantly high, and the top of it is North America, which is a major chunk in the software industry revenue generation. And the leading industry players, if you look at it, are all largely based out of US. Like you take Microsoft, Salesforce, Oracle, SAP, of course, is from the Germany, but it has also grown global, and it is as big in US as other companies today, right? As a market, they're headquartered in Europe. So there has been a phenomenal growth in the IT sector with large companies coming into play. India's also have some very large companies, but largely these companies are into providing services, IT services or IT enabled services. There have been fewer product companies coming from India, and that too in the global market. That is where Cloudsoft Inc. From India made a real departure and a significantly different direction of growth. Of course, today, because of the threat foreseen from AI, many Indian IT services companies are looking to become product companies because there is limited future for IT services of this scale. As you all have been seeing, there has been a significant amount of attritions happening, significant amount of layoffs happening in the IT sector because of AI, right? And that is likely to only increase as we move forward. Now, in this context, as I said, this was one of the early movers from India to be a product company, IT product company. And these companies have been taking cloud adoption in a significant way so that they have been moving from on premise models to SaaS models in a significant way, cloud based models as well as service as a software as a service, SaaS model, right? Where you pay as you use or where you pay as you access. There is also significant amount of enterprise level digital transformation initiatives which are happening. As you would have seen, you all have seen the kind of growth we have seen with the UPI, right, in India, with the Aadhaar system being expanded in India. It's all humongous. So the kind of changes which have been happening in the IT industry are driven by largely these three things: significant amount of cloud adoption, moving from on-premise server model to cloud model, SaaS model coming in more and more, and digital transformation initiatives. And now, of course, AI is going to play a huge, huge role in this. So we'll park that for the moment. So this was the background, right? Global side. And if you look at it in that, where does India stand? India stands at the IT industry contributing about 8% of the national GDP and an employment generation of over 5 million professionals. And as I told you, globally, US market is the largest market. North America is the largest market, because of which the Indian IT industry is very, very strongly export driven, serving global markets. That's where the big revenues and the contribution is coming from, right? And as I was mentioning, there has been a gradual transition happening from IT services to product based or platform led, that is SaaS model businesses. So these are things which have been evolving now. Whereas CloudSoft was one of the early movers into this and moved on to be a product based company much earlier. So CloudSoft was founded in 1996 and it was headquartered in Chennai, south of India. It originally started as a provider of network management and IT monitoring tools. Even then, they were actually producing tools, not services, but they were also making tools. With that tools, of course, they were providing services also as an add-on. But their strength came from developing these small products tools for network management, then IT monitoring. So what it did two, three things which was unique. Many companies which were in network management and IT monitoring tools or some other tools like that, etc., went to PE, went to strategic investors, then slowly changed their color. They got acquired. But this company very firmly stood and was fully bootstrapped. That is, promoter funded. It grew for more than 20 years without any external equity funding. Now, 96 to today, nearly 30 years, no external funding. That's where they were. And strategically, they worked on capabilities in house and transition from point solution to a broad SaaS platform. And today it is offering more than 50 enterprise applications, like a CRM company globally would be doing, or a ERP company would be globally doing. They also provide phenomenal number of enterprise applications, that too on a platform, SaaS platform model. And they have a significant revenue even on the products and the SaaS subscriptions from global customer base. So it's not India centric. It has been developed to be a global product and it has been always presented and offered across the globe. So if you look at the vision and mission of this company called CloudSoft, it was to become one of the world's most respected and trusted software enterprises, and it was to design and deliver integrated, affordable, and intuitive software solutions that empower businesses of all sizes. So it was not just targeting very large enterprises, but it was targeting. That's why they came out with a model where it is not a single enterprise solution, but a series of enterprise solutions, more than 50 numbers of products, which can interconnect and work where required, or work can work independently if the requirement is less. So their idea was to come out with multiplicity of products to be able to provide different solutions to different customer base. This was one of their unique offerings. Now, this company, like every other company, this company also went through its own challenges. In the early years, CloudSoft faced several structural and competitive challenges. The company had very limited brand recognition. They had to fight against the big global names, right? They had to fight against the big global names. but they themselves were not globally recognized. This made it very difficult for them to acquire customers, especially in the global market. And that's where the big money and that's where the big market was. We saw that the IT services, the largest market is in the North America, the second biggest in the Europe, right? Now, this being the case, how do you get customers there if you are not a widely known brand, or if you are not well known and if you are not well respected there? So it took time and it took very big challenges they had to face to establish themselves when there were big names already in the play there who were well known. The second challenge they had was to grow continuously. You need to have continuous innovation also happening, especially in the IT field. The technology changes so fast that before you can finish a product, now new technologies have come, you need to redo the product. And you can make significant changes to the product for everybody's benefit if you can keep pace. So the global customer expectation is for a company which is continuously innovating. That was the prerequisite for growth, especially in an industry like this. The third is, while all this is happening, there is so much of demand for the IT professional. Retaining skilled talent was another major challenge it was facing. There is always an opportunity being made available by multiple IT companies which already have established contracts globally, which could offer better salaries because of that, etc. So the competitive pressure on getting and retaining talent was another major hindrance or obstacle which one had to cross. So the company had one strategic thought and made something very, very significant in the early stages. From merely selling individual tools, they started offering integration of a suite of products. So you want only five components, you can buy those five components. You want the whole suite, you can buy the whole suite. You want only one, you can buy one. So that could be CRM, that could be ERP. ERP itself could be with the manufacturing, without manufacturing, right? Then you could have collaboration platforms, you could have chat, you could have electronic data interface platforms, so many things, all this being integrated. You could have a project management software. So you can decide, and these were built in such a manner that they can integrate into a single integrated solution, or they could work separately. So the products were made in such a manner that it was possible to offer services to a wide range of enterprises, business enterprises. And to enable this to be done in house, it built a dedicated in house team for development, separate dedicated team for development, separate dedicated team for customer support, and a separate dedicated team for sales. It does not stop with that because, as I was saying, the market is elsewhere. So you need to necessarily sell there. So it significantly expanded, invested on creating footprint by opening offices in all key international markets in multiple locations in US, Europe, and Asia. They started opening up offices to be able to market the products in a wide range of locations and to a wide range of customers. And from a business model, also, the company did something which was unique in a way. There are also other examples who are people who have done that. The company adopted a freemium model. What is a freemium model? You give something basic as free, and then anything more you want to do, it becomes a premium or you paid service. So it's a bundle of some free services, and if you want to upgrade, you go into a paid service. What happened with this is that people who took this free, they get used to it, they get used to this software, and they are attracted. They will migrate to the subscription model down the line as their requirements enhanced, and they are already comfortable with this tool and they need additional features which are not available in the free version, and they don't mind the subscription, and then they subscribe for something more, something more, something more, like that it goes. So it enabled them to acquire users. Now, as I was also telling you, they made it into multiple products which are in a suit, and you can pick and choose and use by making it affordable to SMEs. So instead of saying, okay, I'm going to give you a complete enterprise solution, everything can be done under this, everything that enterprise needs can be done under this, and it would cost you $1 billion. Now, how many people are going to take it? Many of them are going to find it difficult to even think of it. So instead, they came out with an idea. We know that you need one or two components. You can buy that. You want a whole suit, you can buy that. You need 10 of them, you can buy that, and it will all work integrated. So the pricing for SME could be very attractive. This is how they were able to touch more business houses, which could be. And it's not only the pricing to make it attractive, it is also to lock them in, that as they grow or as they experience this and they expect other things also to be brought in to a software, they will look at taking more components of this. So they will become a bigger customer for the company. The second thing they did was they placed a strong emphasis on customer support and product training. Now, you need users to be comfortable with the software, because change itself is one big difficulty. Very difficult for people to accept change. So to make it acceptable, significant amount of handholding, support, as well as um training is something critical to make this happen, or to make it even possible to be achieved. So this is the business model innovation they brought into the company. Now, just to look at the kind of competition and where the competition was coming from, if you see the big players who were globally competitors and largely the benchmark, or comparable or likely to be the benchmarks to whom you have to live up to. If you look at it, for CRM, there was a company in US which was providing something like this, and these people were providing from India. For accounting, it was available across. You had systems like Tally in India. You have Zero or one more which is from USA, SEPI from Germany. Like this, many globally there are so many well-known accounting solutions which were competing, and this company had to also compete. IT support services. Yes, again, India being a IT support service hub, India was there. There were competitors in India. There were competitors in US. There were competitors in other countries like Ireland, etc. So there were also big push from these various companies. Now, when it came to workspace and mail, that is for collaboration, for communication, etc., they didn't have any competition in any of the countries. Only some US companies had this kind of product. Like, for example, the most common things are the Microsoft Mail or Gmail, etc. Now, their true competition in workspace and mail was more coming from the US. And similarly, project management, again, the major competition was coming from products which were in US and a few other countries. So this is the kind of spectrum in which they started having products available, so that their products are significantly wide, and they were able to provide a variety of services through this process, and also reach out to a large scale of customers. So this was the benefit they were trying to bring to the process. For instance, if you were using products like Zero for accounting, now it did not have CRM. So you had to buy some other CRM software. These two may not talk to each other. For IT support and monitoring, you need to buy some other software. These may not be interfaced. Your mail system again may not be connected with this. Your collaboration workspace may not be connected. So you need to develop these and integrate yourself. Whereas they were coming out with products which you can integrate it within. So in this context, I just wanted to also touch upon the what is five forces in the software industry. The software industry, the threat of new entrants is high due to low entry barriers and rapid technological innovation. Especially now, what we are seeing with the AI making it such a low code development process. Now, anybody with an idea and a fantastic thought process for what is required could develop a product, could code it. Now, we saw some time back, Claude has used multiple AI itself to collaborate and work and write the codes for a whole software, which means that even very small companies now could come as a threat and come into building products. So one of the key things we need to remember is the threat of new entrants is high because very low entry barriers. The second is buyers have very high bargaining power, large, because they can always switch between software providers. Now, what has happened is over the period, even ERP, it has matured to a level that if you want to migrate from Oracle to SAP, SAP to Oracle, or you want to go to a third software, it is simple comparatively, right? So it is not that once I have become an SAP client or Oracle client, I'm going to stay forever as the client to them, and I've tied to them, wedded to them for eternity. So there is a huge amount of bargaining power, and there is a huge amount of pressure coming from the buyers onto the software product providers. That is what happens. Suppliers, on the hand, obviously have low bargaining power because there are multiple alternatives in the market. There is fierce competition which is there. Threat of substitutes is medium because alternative solutions are limited, but emerging technologies pose risk. Now, of course, there is a area of uncertainty we can say which is coming with AI being used significantly. One cannot exactly gauge at what pace and what kind of changes it can bring in to make changes to the way we keep some of these softwares, etc. For instance, CRM used to be a structured software with AI data capabilities and AI processing capabilities. Now, we may not even want a structured database for CRM. Now, every communication goes in and it analyzes and it gives you whichever way you want when you want. Now, this itself could become a substitute and it could be a big threat for the products companies. So, these are things one has to wait to see how it is going to change. But generally, it was considered that the threat of substitute was medium. But now we need to wait and see how AI is going to rewrite history into this. Industry rivalry is very high, significant competition. Now, this is the market in which the software, especially the software product companies, play. Right? So, we need to keep that in mind in terms of what we are seeing. Okay. So, continuing forward, let's look at a SWOT analysis of this company. Let's look at a SWOT analysis of this company. Clouds of strength, where it's comprehensive product suite. I was time and again talking about how they had taken a wide variety of products, right? The comprehensiveness of its product suite was one of the biggest benefits or strengths to them, right? The second thing is it was a completely bootstrap funding model, so there was no directional pull from different parties with different agenda. Now, generally, what happens when you get a P investor or strategic investors, they all have differing views and they pull in different directions, probably, right? The period, they had a humongous support from customers. I was talking about how they had a great difficulty in reaching out and becoming, but once they built a product customer base, there was humongous support for them because they had created small products which could all work together if required, which were all time tested and were simple that way to use, and everybody could take it. And as I mentioned earlier, when they rolled out products, two things they very clearly focused on was very good customer support, and second, significant training to the customers. So it led to a strong customer loyalty being built. Its weaknesses were largely around comparatively lower brand recognition, even after now 30 years, comparatively lower brand recognition globally, especially globally, and poorer marketing efforts. Now, the amount of marketing. Now, on the opportunities side, there is significant amount of opportunities coming up because they have only till now tapped some of the big markets. There are emerging markets which are there, like the Africa, which is opening up significantly. The flip side of Europe, which is also growing. All this is clearly bringing out more opportunities, and also AI integration could make significant change in the way products are developed and deployed. The threat it faces are from large technology competitors, and the second thing is huge amount of data privacy regulations which are coming, which could put serious limitations on players who cannot provide some data services like what some of the very, very, very large players are providing, or if you don't tie up with them. So these are issues which are newly coming up. One needs to see how these are going to be addressed also. So these are the areas of threat which are coming. In fact, data privacy regulations are becoming so difficult to handle that many countries have requirement that data is not leaving their shores, which means it has to be within that country. Many countries have such requirements coming up. So all that will need to be addressed. And that is where one of the areas of weakness for or threat for this company. It had a very robust risk management framework. So why I'm talking about everything is the company's multiple facets they have to address. You need to also understand. So this gives a significant insight onto the different facets they have to address. What is the biggest risk which a IT company will have? It is to do with data. So, which means cyber security risk. It has to also adhere to regulations like GDPR, which is again data privacy requirements, right? So, continuously, these kind of things have to be addressed. Biggest challenge is to address these kind of issues, right? The second part of it is also to ensure business continuity planning. How you can maintain operations when there are disruptions. And IT companies have significant reliance. Today, you imagine so much we are reliant on, say, a simple thing like internet. What happens if there is a internet disconnection? What kind of alternates we have? What kind of fallback mechanisms we have to be able to manage the business continuously? Disruption is something which could happen. So how do we manage? And looking at the global market, playing on the currency fluctuation exposures. It's another major area of risk which is carried, which all needs to be addressed by any company and especially IT companies. The company was not only focusing on all this, but it was also focusing on the sustainability. ESG has become the key word today, right? And it was also having requirements of CSR. So the company, how it was working towards sustainability. So CloudSort had implemented carbon neutral data centers. So the first thing they were saying is, okay, boss, we use a lot of energy, we use a lot of energy for our data centers. So let me work on making my data centers carbon neutral. That is my contribution to the environment. Then, from a CSR perspective, it was supporting rural education by donating software and learning tools, and it was also encouraging employee engagement through volunteering programs, not only by money but also by getting its people to spend time. So, it is a social outreach and also creating that kind of a culture and mindset in its own employees, etc. So this is what they were doing. So in this background, let's look at some of the scenarios to look at how one needed to look at multiple aspects of the requirements. So the first one is a market entry strategy. Okay, at some point of time in the past, right? Not today, they are already there. Cloudsoft was planning to enter the European market. Now, the question to look at and take a decision was on whether the company should adopt a direct sales model or it should partner with local distributors. Very, very simple one liner question to look at. Should the company adopt a direct sales model or should it partner with local distributors? I sell to the distributor and then he on sells because he's already present there, he has relationships, etc. etc. Okay, so these are possible things to look at. Now, in this context, what are the key things we need to consider? What kind of market entry strategies are there? What is the risk assessment and the cost benefit analysis? So, let's look at it in a little more detail now. So, the indicative answer can be around this. We are going to be discussing in more detail what they actually did, right? Uh, Generally, the direct sales model would have higher control over pricing because you are directly controlling the pricing. You will have a significant benefit of branding it better and direct customer relationships. But it also has a very high initial investment to be made. So you need to start your own office, you need to set up your own team there, you need to ensure that the team spends adequate time to initially go around the market and establish themselves to be even heard of, and then slowly build the relationships to then convert it to sales. So it's a longer duration, which obviously means high initial investments. On the other hand, you can just partner with distributors who are already distributing products into that economy or in that geography. So this automatically means just the opposite, very low setup cost, ready local expertise to reach to the customers. So making it a faster market entry. However, it leads to less control over customer experience and customer relationships for the brand, for Cloudsoft Inc. Because you are dependent and also running on others, right? So between these two, what will be the decision making factors? The decision making factors are going to be driven by the market size, what kind of regulatory environment is there and the kind of competition which is there, and ultimately doing a cost benefit analysis. Sometimes even the cost benefit analysis you might ignore because you find that there are certain other things, competition is less, so you may want to do it yourself. Very complex regulatory environment could be there, and because of that, adherence could be a very, very difficult thing immediately. So you might find that distributors who are already set may be a better option. So there could be other reasons also which can drive you decision. So these are the key factors which could be probably looking at. Now let's look at what they were actually doing and how did they end up going around or going about this, right? So that's what we are going to be looking at. So I started with an initial assessment. So we said entry strategy for Europe. So first of all, before that, why even Europe, right? So that should be the first question. Where should we, which geography we should be looking at even to expand? So why they chose Europe? There was high digital adoption and a SaaS maturity because these people were more focused on SaaS model of delivery. There was a strong SME and mid market base. Like I explained, their strategy was to come out with a suite of products so they can focus on the SME and mid market where they can sell individual products or a bundle of products by which they could rapidly expand and sell. And the individual sales ticket size could not maybe not so huge, but overall the revenues can be significantly large, and they could also rapidly ex- expand with a customer base. The third reason why Europe demand for integrated cost effective solutions was large. As I told you, multiple products, but they can be integrated and it works well with each other. GDPR compliance readiness was a competitive advantage. This product was already GDPR compliant or ready for GDPR compliance. So the market, then okay, in Europe, where do we go? We can't just go around all the cities. So they looked at pilot markets as UK, Germany, France, and Netherlands. The criteria was English proficiency to an extent, tech infrastructure, and competition density. And the entry mode was looked at direct sales versus local partners versus acquisition. Okay, that is the third option now. I can sell directly, I can partner with distributors, or I can acquire an entity, then it becomes my direct sales, but they are as good as local partners or distributors because they have already established presence and they have established connections. And the strategic fit. So product suite aligned with you demand for CRM, finance, and various collaboration tools or a integration of all these. There was this great opportunity because they were GDPR compliant, differentiate with privacy first, integrated solution. So that was a winning solution they could put across at that right time in the right market. Right. So this was the rationale for selecting Europe and where to go in Europe. When they went, they ultimately went for a hybrid approach. They said step one will be direct online sales, which I earlier, as I told you, a freemium model. So some things are free. You register and you can start using, right, some services which are free. So that way, what happens? Immediately, you are getting some people who are going to start using it. So you are going to get some customer base. And then those who are on free model could move to a paid model based on their interest and your ability to upsell, etc. So the first step they decided was to go on a direct online sales model. which would start creating a user base. And when you go on an online sales model, you could also support it with certain marketing strategies, advertising strategies, reach out strategies, which would direct them to this. As a step two, they started some local offices in select cities. Now, we saw earlier they had chosen four countries to look at. In three places, they set up offices, small offices, and parallelly also built a partner network for implementation and support. Now, what they decided that yes, we'll get implementation partners, we'll get support partners who are local, experienced firms, but we will sell the product. And in this, what happens is even though they are partner for implementation and support, they will also actively sell your product, or they will also actively uh, market your product or take to market your product because they will get the implementation support services. And they made some timelines and plans for this, that in year one they will do the market research, legal setup, and GDR compliance audit. Then by year two, they will launch local websites, hire country managers, and by year three, have local data centers. Like I told you, some countries have strict laws about data residence, critical data residence. Then by year four, local customer support in other languages like German, French, and Spanish. Now, English, German, French, and Spanish, if you have covered most of the requirements in that region. And they said this has to be done by a multi-departmental team. Cannot be one department's task to do this. There has to be people from legal and compliance involved in this. There has to be finance and taxation team involved in this. There has to be people from marketing who have to be involved in this. There has to be IT and data security people who are involved in this. So multiple departments were involved in working on this entry mode and executing it. So, in executing the entry strategy, what were the issues they were facing and what kind of mitigations they took? First is regulatory GDPR. So, they implemented data processing agreements, appointed EU representatives who will actually take care of this, right? Then there was this VAT regulation. EU is a host of multiple countries. So how do you deal with all this? So many countries, so many regulations, so many VAT to be complied with, etc. So they went in for what is known as the VAT MOS. In EU, this mini one-stop shop is an option available whereby you can register under that and deal in all the EU states, which was a fantastic model made easy for them to reach out to any state. Otherwise, for each country, they should have looked at registrations, and maybe some office space, all that. So this obviated the requirement for that and simplified. So they looked at this VAT MOS as a solution to reach out to all the EU states with a simple one place registration. Then there was local labor laws. Each country had local labor laws. As you might have all read in papers and all, also, there are countries where there are requirements that after 5 o'clock you cannot contact the employee. After the working hours, you cannot contact him. If you contact, that's a violation. That's a penalizable labor law violation. So you needed to ensure that your whole process, your labor contracts, your everything is aligned to each country and to your expectations and requirements, balancing it. So they entered into structured contracts for the EU employees, which are different from probably country to country, etc., as may be required. The next thing to look at is the cultural and market adaptation. Now you need to have localized UI and marketing campaigns. Interestingly, as we are all English users, we know that if you screen is there, it comes normally your menu comes from the left, right? But if you go to Arabic states, the whole Arabic is from right to left. Unless you create localized user interfaces, it is very difficult for people to comprehend and actually use it. It's very difficult for them to take it. Then there has to be localized marketing campaigns. You can't go to Europe and talk about some typical Indian cultural thing and try to market. It won't work because they may not even understand. So you need to vibe with that. You need to take it in that line and do the market campaigns accordingly. Pricing has to be based on euros, and you need to offer annual billings, which would make it more acceptable in countries like that. And it becomes easier for you to also collect. You collect 1 year in advance. The next thing is to also build case studies with EU based customers so that EU based customers, other customers are finding you trustworthy to take the product from you. So, how do you make them accept your product? You showcase other customers from you who have benefited from it or who have found this to be meeting their requirements. So, that required that you also ensure that you are having such case studies prepared. So, that is what they did, right? Then, operationally, currency fluctuation is another major issue because we operate from India in INR, all costs are in INR. Now, all your sales and local costs there are going to be in euro. So, they use forward contracts wherever required for currency fluctuation protections. Then they were also finding that they were not getting the talent in the individual locations. To enable that, they partnered with local universities for recruitment. So go to the source and try and do recruitment from there. This is how they reached out. And how did it show up in their performance? After 3 years in the EU market, the revenue contribution was 15% of global revenue. They had a customer base of 25,000 plus businesses from EU, and retention rate was 90%. Annual contracts being replenished 90%. Very successfully done. The key success factors were the strong data privacy compliance, which was their USP in sales, being GDPR compliant, ab initio at the beginning. Then localized support. As I was mentioning, implementation support, they partnered with local partners who could have that relationship, who could also ensure that there is continuity, etc. So it reduced the churn. The number of people who leave the contract reduced. And this partner ecosystem by itself accelerated the enterprise adoption because the partners were also looking at more implementation revenue, more support revenue. So they were also keen. If somebody has bought three of your suite products, they will try and see if they have opportunity to sell another two to them. Are they growing now? Do they need something more? They kept on looking at and made it grow. Though you were directly selling, you had people who enabled you to sell also in the process. And everything doesn't work well, so you also learn some lessons. What they found was direct sales worked better in UK and Netherlands. In Germany, it was very important for local partners for trust building. So in Germany, if you try to do direct sales, it was not working. And pricing sensitivity was high in Southern Europe. These are the things they learned over the period from their experience of entry strategy, which they then accordingly considered in their growth plans. Now, let's look at the second scenario which they had to look at. It's connected with financial reporting. Cloudsoft R&D spending had increased because they were very significantly dependent on R&D, right? Innovation is the key, as we were talking about. Now, the question was how they should treat this R&D cost under Ind AS. So, whether to treat it as intangible assets, how much to capitalize, what to expense, what are the audit implications. That was the second part which we need to look at in this company. The indicative answer we all know research phase will have to be expensed off. Development phase you capitalize only if technical feasibility is established. There is an intention and also ability to complete. That is, you have the money to complete it. Probable future economic benefits are there, and there is a reliable measurement which is possible. All this leads to the requirement of audit. There should be proper documentation. Capitalization will have to be subject strict to the criteria. Now, Cloudsoft regularly invests on driving innovation, particularly in AI, cloud infrastructure, and SaaS platforms. It spends about 25 to 30% of annual revenue in R&D. Huge amounts. Because we said development, there is a separate team. So there were key projects which are going on. AI-based CRM assistant. They already had CRM products. Now they are doing a AI-based CRM assistant. Low-code platform for development, which again is replacing, right? And then a data analytics and business intelligence tools. These were the projects which were going on. Accounting dilemma was whether cost must be classified as research phase, development phase, when. It has strategic importance because it impacts on the profitability which is reported. It shows up the balance sheet strength in terms of net worth, etc., and asset size, etc. What the investor perception would be. As we know, it has been fully bootstrapped, but still there are other stakeholders who are always interested. And the general thing, when you, if and when you think of going this thing, and what kind of tax benefits can come. These are the various things which needs to be looked at. India's principles being applied, research phase was expense. So exploratory AI model training, market feasibility studies, early stage prototyping, all this was expensed. Development phase was capitalized only if the four criteria were met. So the capitalization criteria it was established was met for ZIA AI assistant, right? There was a development which was being done post feasibility sign off. That is, after the feasibility was signed off, development has been commenced. So that ZIA AI assistant project. Then the second is the Catalyst low code platform. After the beta version, they had done the beta version and then now they were developing it. So capital criteria was met. They were to capitalize for that. Then the analytics plus modules for data analytics. In all this, the documentation were around what was the project charter and then the stage gate approvals. That is, each stage as it crosses that, what kind of approvals are there? That yes, it is. been, the prototype has been successfully demonstrated. So there is a technical feasibility established. Yes, there is a budget which has been approved, and there is a project team which has been created. So the intention to compete is established. There is a market feasibility which has been done. So the ability to sell is also established. Four, there are adequate categorization of costs, tracking of timesheets, etc. So reliable measurement of expenditure is available. Like that, every stage gate, there are approvals and whether those are tracked and taken. The technical feasibility reports which supports that the product is ready now for capitalization. Then cost tracking by project, as I was mentioning. All this is required to do it, right? So in this, what happens, just to again touch upon, ideation research is always expensed off. Proof of concept is also expensed off. When the development starts, you have to evaluate for capitalization. And when you make a beta release, you can capitalize eligible costs. And on launch and rollout, you will have to amortize it over the useful life, generally around 3 to 5 years in this industry. This is what happens. Now, from a control perspective, to ensure that this is rightly done, because the amounts involved are significantly large for this company, this is one of the key areas for audit, disclosure, governance, everything. So the R&D committee will have to review stages of progression. The finance team will have to ensure that tracking of costs by project phase is there. Auditors will be focused on verifying the documentation and compliance, and appropriate disclosures will have to come in the financial statements. So, what is the financial and strategic impact it has? It creates a balance sheet strength. Capitalized R&D shows intangible assets as an asset. It improves your debt to equity ratio. It enhances borrowing capacity. If you write off everything, net worth goes down. That's what is happening. From a P&L management perspective, because the expense is now fully written off and it is amortized, it smoothens earning by matching cost with revenue. You need to also look at the tax benefits. There could be 100% deduction which is available for expensed amounts, whereas whenever it is capitalized, it is only the amortization you might get and maybe some weighted deduction under 35(2)(ab). Of course, weighted deductions are going away now, so that's a different thing. Then investor communication from that perspective, how it is highlighted in the management discussion and analysis. Because R&D is the investment in future, right? So you need to necessarily bring it out appropriately for you to bring out where the company stands and how it is strategically looking at it. So the company over a period evaluated and identified certain key metrics like how much is capitalized versus expense. Roughly, it used to be in the 40/60 ratio because there is a lot of expense also happening because there is continuous innovation which is being looked at. So nearly 60% was getting expensed, only 40% was getting capitalized. Then amortization period was 3 to 7 years. Some tech products went to 7 years, but many were in the 3 year bracket. So that's how they did this. In this whole thing, from an audit consideration, what will we be focusing? Classification accuracy, whether it is research or development. Feasibility documentation, is capitalization justified? Is there a feasibility report, etc.? Then how the cost allocation is happening, especially one is direct cost, the second is indirect cost. How are they getting allocated? Once it has started amortization, we need to still test for impairment if the requirement is there. So whether annual testing is required and how it is being done. The normal audit findings which can come up is that there are inadequate stage gate documentation. That is whether that particular product under development has crossed which stage and who has cleared that it has crossed that stage. So this they resolved by having a project management software, right, which integrated their Jira and finance, the time management, the resource deployment management, and the finance was integrated so that they had a project management software to run this. The second finding were on overly aggressive capitalization, possible overly aggressive capitalization. So they brought in a technical review committee to oversight on this whole capitalization. So there is an independent review which is happening before it is even capitalized and taken forward. And whether disclosure requirements were met, what is the nature of intangibles, the amortization periods and methods, impairment test results, and breakdown of the R&D expenditure. Now, these were the various things which are looked at. Now, let me take you to the MCQs which are coming from this. One second, I'll just put on the MCQs. Yeah, I hope the MCQ is visible. Good.
Yes, sir.
So let's look at that. Uh, yeah. So the first one is clouds of decision to develop an in-house CRM tool. Is it an example of horizontal integration, vertical integration, diversification, or market penetration? So if you look at it, the answer is vertical integration because it is taking it one level further. So it's adding more capabilities. You have the accounting, then on top of it, you are also taking it for your customer relationship. Corporate governance related question. Which committee is responsible for overseeing CloudSoft's ethical AI practices? Now we are talking about ethical AI practices, which is more in today's context becoming critical and important. Is it the audit committee? Is it the CSR committee? Is it the ethics and compliance committee? Or is it the risk management committee? Who needs to look at it? Now, if we look at the answer for this, once, yeah, ethics and compliance committee because it is charged with ensuring ethics and compliance within the company on everything. So AI practices being used or AI being used or any products using AI being developed will also lead to the same thing, how to ensure ethics in that. That will also have to come to the same committee because they are overly in charge for ethics in the company. Totally. Cloudshare provides a software support to a US client from India. Now, is this treated as an export of service, interstate supply, deemed export, or none of the above? To be treated as an export of service, and it will be accordingly considered for taxation. From a financial management, which ratios best measures clouds of operational efficiency? Is it current ratio, debt to equity ratio, operating profit margin, or price to earnings ratio? Which one determines the operational efficiency? It is the operating profit margin. From a financial ratio, this is one which is pointing to the operational efficiency. How much operating profit margin you are making. Under the Companies Act 2013, Cloudsoft's CSR spending should be at least 1% of average net profits, 2%, 3%, or 5%. Now, as you can see, it is 2%. Section 135 talks of 2% as being the CSR funding spending to be done by companies which are making profits and which are covered by CSR requirement. With that, we come to the end of the first case study, and maybe we can take a 10-minute break before we start the next case study. Right now, the time is 7:50. Can we reassemble by 8 and we can take up the second case study? Thank you. Have a short break. We'll join again in 10 minutes to take it forward. So I have shared the presentation for the second case study. I hope it is visible. So let's start with that. Now, this is the second case study for today. Again, we are going to look at multifaceted requirements arising from a different company in a different scenario. Now, in the earlier case, we saw how an Indian IT company became global, right? Now, here we are going to look at how an international company came into India and built market leadership through strategic acquisitions. So, how they grew the Indian market, right? So, this is the story we are going to look at. And I must tell you here, both the previous case study and this case study are based on what actually has happened. And I have only modified the names and the some of the information to make it anonymous. But these are actual case studies. And this is another such case study which actually has been shown in the Indian market to have happened in the past. Now, this case study is about how they built market leadership through strategic acquisitions. So, the quote of this Elevate Corp global CEO, Elevate Corp is the company which really grew in India like this. Its global CEO said, growth through acquisition is not just about buying companies, it's about integrating cultures, processes, and visions. So, you need to see beyond just numbers. You need to be able to integrate. If you don't integrate, the acquisitions don't work. So this is the crux of the issue. And as we saw in the earlier thing, the whole IBS purpose of IBS as a study is to be able to understand the decision making and look at it from a chartered accountant's eyes from multi dimensions. That is the whole purpose. So let's go into this company. This company was in a elevator and escalator industry, lifts and escalators, right? So the market size is expected to be around $90 billion globally, and the key geographic markets in this region now, growing regions, are China, India, and Japan. Why China, India, and Japan? There is a lot of infrastructure happening. So obviously there is a lot more requirements which are coming up. Now, leading industry players are one, Elevate Corp itself, which is a global entity. There is Schindler, Kone, Mitsubishi, so many are there, players in India. The primary growth drivers for elevators and escalators is urbanization. More and more smart cities coming, green buildings companies coming, right? These are the reasons why we are getting into more of these demand for elevators and escalators. Indian elevator market is about 12,000 crores per annum and growing at about 8% CAGR. 8% substantial CAGR, as you can see, compared to especially the global markets. The key segments can be looked at as residential, commercial, right, where you have office spaces, lifts have to be bigger, etc. Industrial, where it could be in difficult terrains, it could be in for loads which are very heavy, it could be for different reasons. And then metro projects, wherever you are having metro projects, malls, etc., so many escalators are coming. There has been a structural shift happening in the industry over the period. There were many domestic players, huge number of domestic players in the past. Like there used to be Bharat Bijli, now I think it's gone. Johnson Live, it's still there, Blue Star, right? Over a period, there have been MNCs which have been coming in through joint ventures and acquisition. There were a plethora, even today, there are many domestic players who are very small and regional. But largely consolidations have been happening. So this is the scenario one shift which has happened over the period. So this is a case study involving such a case. Elevate Corp was founded in 1853, so 150, nearly 175 years back. Headquartered in US, it was a global leader in design, especially and manufacturing and installation of elevators. It has operations in nearly 200 countries and territories and a strong international presence supported by extensive service and maintenance network. In a lift industry, you need to not only have a good manufacturing setup, but you must have extensive service and maintenance network because every lift has a continuous servicing requirement and maintenance, preventive maintenance requirement, which is more or less mandatory. So this is something key which needs to be considered. As you know, in India, periodically lifts have to be certified for being transport worthy. To be able to do that, there must be a maintenance which is happening so that the lifts are in a condition where they can be certified as safe for use. So that is why it is very important. It's not a one time sale and forget it. The service and maintenance is at the heart of the whole business model. In fact, interestingly, this industry makes money from service and maintenance than by just sales. So, in the initial years, when the companies sell more lifts and have very less lifts under AMC, they will be making losses. And as the number of total lifts sold cumulatively increases, obviously their annual maintenance contract base expands. That is when they start making profits. So this is typically the model globally for lift companies. Now this Elevate Corp places significant emphasis on innovation, advanced technology and engineering expertise being brought in. The vision was to be the most trusted provider of innovative, safe, and sustainable vertical mobility solutions. Now, in a lift, one of the most important thing people look at is safety. Now, if there is one case of failure, it tarnishes the reputation so much that you might lose hundreds of sales for years to come. So, a significant amount of pressure is there to ensure that the lifts are very safe. So that is one key thing which is important in this. And the mission was to design, manufacture, install, and service superior elevator and escalator systems that elevate safety. See, everywhere safety is coming first, reliability and performance for our customers. Because, like I said, safety is of one of the highest pecking order in the requirement. Now, the early challenges this company felt was that it originally entered in 1990s through a joint venture. Initially, it was concentrating on high-end commercial and premium infrastructure projects in those early days. So what happened because of that, its presence was very limited. And the market was dominated by well established domestic players with strong local reach and cost advantages. Because they were small and regional, they were able to manage costs better. They had cost advantage and they had that local connect and reach. So, looking at all this, Elevate Corp realized that if you have to deal with some country like India, you need to rapidly expand and deepen the footprint across. So, in the 2000s, it reassessed its own strategy and adopted a strategic shift towards acquisitions as the mode of growth. So that way you can rapidly expand, right? So this was the key change in how they were trying to approach. So the first major acquisition they made was of this company called Mumbai Lifts. As you can see from the name itself, it's a domestic company with a local regional setup. It was a well-established Indian elevator company. This acquisition provided immediate access to a domestic manufacturing facility. Now, that was a big thing. And an extensive service network, though, of course, in a region, and a recognized local brand presence. So, what was the strategic rationale in doing this transaction? It accelerated market penetration because the local expertise was already there and the infrastructure was already there. So, this enabled the company to scale operations quickly. Like I was discussing earlier, the strategic shift towards acquisition was for rapid expansion. So this was the first step which they took, the first acquisition they did. The second acquisition they did was a company called Chennai Elevators Private Limited in 2012. This again, as you can see, is again a regional company. It was a family owned company specializing in elevators and escalators. And this now suddenly took the company from Western concentration to South India. So expansion into South India, right? But during the integration phase here, it presented a lot of challenges, particularly in aligning the acquired workforce with their original workforce and their culture. Because this was a fully family owned company, the culture and the way the workers were, aligned had a significant difference from a corporate structure which Elevate Corp had already implemented in the West and it was living by. Then another third one in 2018, they bought what's known as a Delhi Vertical Systems, again an elevator company based at or headquartered out of Delhi, mostly focusing on North, for a deal size of about 2,500 crores. This was a major consolidation, right? It was to expand in scale and capabilities. This gave them access to government and metro rail contracts, while also substantially strengthening its service and maintenance network across India in multiple locations. Because this Delhi vertical systems was having contracts with metros, government organizations in many states. So they had service set up to support that. So it gave them access into very many locations in a quick way. Now, Elevate Corp with these acquisitions moved into a position of dominant player. This is how they moved up. But when you look at it, you need to also look at all the other aspects which are coming along with that. The post acquisition integration strategy, which was looked at. So, how did Elevate Corp go about it? It implemented a structured post acquisition strategy focused on long term value creation and operational consistency. So, the moment companies were acquired, slowly they acquired all of that under one brand called Elevate Corp India. So, slowly they got rid of the individual brands. So, they brought it under a single brand while retaining KMP and critical technical talent to preserve institutional knowledge and customer relationships. There is so much of wealth of information which is there in people who have been operating businesses and wealth of relationships which they have with customers, which is critical for growth. So by retaining them but bringing them all under a single brand. As part of the IT systems, they rolled out SAP across so that they can standardize processes and improve control. Simultaneously, they also conducted comprehensive training programs for technicians to align service quality. So, the technicians from all these companies would come with different backgrounds. So, how to ensure that all technicians are similar under Elevate Corp India, though they come from maybe Mumbai lifts or a Chennai lift or from a Delhi vertical systems, they should be similar. So, they brought in this to training sessions, comprehensive training programs to ensure technicians were aligned on service quality, safety standards, and expertise. So, this is how they address the integration. Simultaneously, supply chain integrations also were being taken up. So, what they did, they consolidated procurement activities, right, which ensured economies of scale, cost efficiencies, and also standardization. When three different companies were operating earlier, there might not have been standardization between them. Now, this brought in standardization into the whole thing. The company also focused on developing and strengthening localized supplier partnership to reduce dependency on imports and enhance responsiveness. So, if you are getting from somewhere nearby, it's easier. The biggest component is steel, largest volume is steel. Largest component is steel. So, the steel procurement, by getting it from localized suppliers, they could significantly improve the responsiveness. All this led to an operational efficiency with lead times being reduced from 12 weeks to 6 weeks. So these are all things which they brought to the table on a centralized basis. By centralization and also having local partners being developed or enhanced the relationships. So this is what they worked on the supply chain side for integration. From a financial structure and funding perspective, the acquisitions were all funded through a prudent mix of internal accruals and foreign debt. So this enabled the company to optimize its capital structure with limited equity dilution. So they didn't dilute the equity holdings. They brought in foreign debt and also by internal accruals. The foreign borrowings were raised in compliance with external commercial borrowing guidelines, prescribed under FEMA. As you all know, FEMA applies in India, including adherence to eligibility criteria, end-use restrictions, minimum maturity requirements, and RBI reporting norms. Because we are taking foreign currency borrowings, there is a foreign exchange risk which arises. And such foreign currency risks were being managed through currency swap arrangements. So, this is how they were addressing the funding requirements and the financial structure. On the tax implications of acquisition, the acquisition triggered stamp duty, right? Depending on which state it was in, either on the transfer of shares or the underlying transfer of assets. So there were stamp duty involvement, which is there, which had to be looked at state-wise. It also required evaluation of GST implications on the transfer of asset, depending on the structure, whether you are buying it through merger, whether you are buying assets, whether you are doing a slump sale, whether you are doing share purchase to make it a subsidiary. What you were doing made all the difference. So GST implications were also to be evaluated on a case-to-case basis. They also had to look at tax benefits which are available from accumulated losses, if any, and if that is to be available, whether it is in compliance with Section 79. So all this had to be looked at. Post-acquisition, all intercompany transactions, wherever companies were kept separate, were structured in line with transfer pricing regulations to maintain arm's length processes. So to ensure that there is no tax implications arising from that. On completion of some of these acquisitions, one of the major audit challenge which came about was on valuation of identifiable intangible assets such as brand value and customer contracts. As we all know, these things require significant management judgment and also reliance on valuation experts who have to be engaged. The audit also focused on contingent liabilities. I'll talk about it more later. Contingent liabilities which were coming from the acquisitions to ensure all present obligations from past events were appropriately identified, measured, and disclosed. Further, as the merged entity was subject to audit under CARO, it necessitated expanded audit procedures to assess internal controls, statutory compliance, and reporting accuracy, even though the standalone entities earlier may not be covered under that. But in the case of post-acquisition, they are all covered because of the large size they have now acquired. From a risk management perspective, the company focused on managing cultural integration risks. As I told you, when Chennai was purchased, one of the biggest challenges, Chennai was a family-run business. So, whereas Elevate Corp was a completely corporatized culture, so there was difficulty in managing that and moving that. But that is one key thing required for success: cultural integration. This is key to ensure that all key and talent remains with the business and also gives you business continuity. There was also need to look at IT controls, cybersecurity controls across the other companies, especially the acquired companies, to ensure that safety and safeguards are held at the highest level. Post acquisition, there was also appropriate focus given on having a board composition which is aligned with listed company requirements. Earlier, it was all separate companies, individual. They may not have had the same level of governance expectations and requirements and disclosure requirements, documentation requirements, etc. So, how to transcend that such a structure into all these entities which have been acquired or which have become part of this entity now? How to ensure all of them fall in line, right? So that is another key thing which was looked at, and all related party transactions were getting reported and appropriately tracked. Not only just reported, but evaluated for being at arm's length to hold governance and regulatory governance. Post acquisition, did it succeed? It succeeded significantly because its market share became 35% from 15% earlier. So it was one of the largest player, became one of the largest player in the Indian market with a service network of 500 plus offices across India and a revenue growth CAGR of 12% and ROI improved to 18% from its earlier 12%. So on all accounts, it made a significant benefit and positive with the strategic move of acquiring leadership through strategic acquisitions. Now, in this context, let's look at some of the scenarios. The first one is looking at the strategic rationale. Why did Elevate Corp choose acquisitions over organic growth? The key topics to consider are right market entry, how what strategies are possible, speed to market, and where the Porter's five forces lie. So the situation in early 2000 was markets landscape was dominated by strong domestic players with deep customer relationships.
Sir,
Elevate Corps, yes,
I have one doubt.
yeah, please.
So, the right now the case study is that the case study we are discussing is it in the case study digest or is it a new case study?
It's a new case study.
The material is not there in the BOS portal.
That material will be uploaded along with it. Today only I had shared the Word material as well as this. This will also get shared. Everything will be posted onto the this thing.
Okay, sir.
Sure, sure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. So while the landscape was dominated by strong domestic players, Elevate Car was seen as a niche player with limited service network and high cost structure. So he was looking some premium player. He was not there everywhere. There were growth barriers because there was a long sales cycle for institutional projects, high capital expenditure for greenfield manufacturing because they did not have adequate manufacturing facility across India. Elevate Corp did not have, right? Till they acquired, they had limited manufacturing facility. It was a time consuming process to build brand trust nationwide. And as I was mentioning, one of the critical things in elevator industry is service network and immediately being available there. So to create a service network across India is again a big challenge. So this was the scenario. So what were the options? Organic growth. So they said organic growth of to achieve 15% market share was 10 to 12 years. So additional 15% if you have to do, it will take 10 to 12 years to reach there. And it required an investment of 800 to 1000 crores in facilities and marketing. The risk was competitors could consolidate during this period. It's a long period, and by then your competitors could run faster. The acquisition strategy meant it is a faster market access, and you immediately get a huge network for servicing. And it also leads to immediate revenue contributions. But it also meant higher upfront cost. Acquisition doesn't come cheap. You have to pay for it. So the decision framework used was to do a Porter's 5-4 analysis which showed a high bargaining power of existing players. Market entry timing was critical due to India's construction boom. So this is the time to market. And the faster you are in the market, the better you are. And there was a corporate mandate from global headquarters to achieve market leadership in key emerging markets by 2010. All emerging markets. India was also there. This was not specific for India, this was for all emerging markets. The idea was that globally, how do they grow? Because the developed markets are more or less saturated, the growths are limited. The big growths were happening in the emerging markets. And if you don't grow there, globally, you will become smaller. So that was the rationale for the global mandate. So, how did they go about selecting the acquisition targets? They gave weightage. Do they have good manufacturing capability? 30% weightage for that, right? That they should have existing facilities in India with expansion potential. So that was one of the key things they were looking at in looking for targets to acquire. Service network, 25% weightage being given to that. Whether they have coverage in tier 2, tier 3 cities, because that's how you can expand pan India. If you are in 5 metros, you're there, but you're not really everywhere. You're not pan India. Tier 2, tier 3 cities were crucial, especially because the boom was happening and it's expected to happen and continue to happen now. So, service network, brand equity. Was he a trusted local name? There was a 20% weightage given for that. Management quality of the target company. Why is it important? Because you need the local management to continue. There is a retention which is required, and they should be able to perform. So that in a requirement of management quality is critical for you to be able to perform post acquisition and integrate well. And then financial health, their debt levels and profitability. So then the next thing they did was that they prioritized companies with complementary geographical strength rather than buy everything in the same place. That's why you see that their acquisition were in different geographies so that they could really become pan India. First acquisition of Mumbai was chosen because of strong Western India presence, modern factory there, and a profitable service division they had. Like I said, service is what really makes money. And the due diligence focus there was on Factories Act compliance, pending litigations, and employee contracts. When they took the Chennai elevators, they chose that because it had a southern stronghold, and they were also specializing in escalators, which was, not normal. Most of it in those days was focused on lifts. Escalator market was smaller, so they had an escalator focus, which added value to them. The challenge here was the family owned business transition related challenges. So that's what was the focus there. And the third acquisition, when they did, it was to get pan India presence from them. Delhi vertical system was not just in North India, it was pan India. They had government contracts. Why were they pan India? Because they were doing government contracts in multiple states. They had multiple state presence, though maybe limited in many states, but they had multiple states presence. It was also a listed company, so that transparency was there. There, the complexities was getting shareholder approval, CCI clearance, right? All that was the concern there. So this is how the target selection and focus of area for the transaction was looked at. When it came to execution and integration strategy, right? The phase one was pre-closing preparation, 3 to 6 months before deal. There were joint integration teams formed from both companies. They communicated plans for employees, customers, suppliers. So they had joint discussions and prepared for it. They did the IT systems compatibility assessment, and parallelly, someone was working on the regulatory approval roadmap. If RBI approvals were required or SEBI approvals were required for that listed entity in Delhi, CCI approval again for Delhi, any other regulatory approvals which were required to move. Then the phase two was post closing, the first 100 days. First was to transition the brand. So for 12 to 18 months, there was a dual branding. They said formerly Mumbai Lifts, now an elevator corp company. Then slowly they changed it and gradual visual identity transition. So after 18 months, it just became elevator corp India. That's it. So brand transition was one which was done in a planned manner. Then employee integration. They decided that they will not do any layoffs in the first year because they didn't want any unrest to come, any inefficient, etc. They said, okay, we'll give a 1 year time. Post that, we will deal with it. By then, we will have all the other people, everything in place, and there will be good trust built. So, if you lay off some people who are not performing, or you had closed down something which was this thing, there will be support from others at least. Then they also brought in retention bonus for all the key technical staff so that they feel more attached, and it's a retention incentive. They also brought in cross training so that people could work on multiple things. So they became more efficient. Cross training could be in multiple divisions or departments. It could be even in multiple branch. For example, the lifts which are made by A company and B company could be different in certain technical specs. So you cross train people, service engineers to handle both is a good way to ensure that you can service the whole set as you move forward. Then merging the operations, so implementing a common procurement system, service teams being reorganized, especially with the Delhi company being acquired, it had people everywhere. There was also people who were already there from the Chennai or the Mumbai lifts, elevator corps, original team, etc., in different geographies. So how to rationalize that and make the teams geographical rather than by legacy company? Then how to standardize safety standards to a single structure, which Elevate Corp was following some global protocols. How to ensure everybody is aligned to that? These were the focus there. Then customer communication. How personalized letters were sent to major clients so that they see the transition in a positive light. Then service contracts being slowly migrated. So next time the AMC is coming, you take it in Elevate Corp's name, right? Maybe with the same terms initially and slowly change it to the terms which Elevate Corp has been giving in the past and bring it to a standardized structure. So all this have a timeline, and for all this to enable this, a transition helpline so that customers are happy. Customers do not feel the brunt. So what did it all result into? In terms of quantitative outcome, market share went up from 8% to 32%. Service coverage from 45 cities to 200 plus cities. Manufacturing capacity from 2,000 units in a year to 15,000 units a year. See the ability to grow this kind of a thing. Revenue from 350 crores to 2,800 crores, and an operating margin going up from 12% to 18%. So what was it which was achieved? In 5 years, they achieved time to market what would have taken 15 years organically, and quickly got an understanding of the Indian customer preferences and price points because local expertise was being taken in. Supply chain optimization could be done because there were learnings from multiple entities which were combined to centralized procurement. So significant cost reductions could be brought in there. Talent acquisition. All these companies had their own group of very highly skilled or talented persona. So they were all available now into a single entity. And because of one of these companies, a lot of government relationships which also came. So project businesses. And because you were doing government projects, then you could also pitch for private large projects, infra projects. So that is another thing which came up. What was unanticipated but still we got benefit is cross-selling opportunities across customer bases. Then best practice sharing between these teams from various backgrounds. Innovation pipeline enhanced with India specific product adaptations. So that is another thing which came. So when they saw the products and compared the products and the technical people spoke to technical people, they found that, though Elevate Corp says they have the best technology and the best product, some of these products had some unique features which were India centric and what would make sense in this thing. So they enhance the overall products. So in the whole process, this company significantly benefited and grew itself by acquisition as a strategy rather than uh, organic growth. Now, looking at some of the other scenarios coming from this, from an India's financial reporting perspective, Elevate Corp paid 2,500 crores for Delhi vertical systems. As per books, the net assets were 1,800 crores. So the question is, how should goodwill be recognized and tested for impairment? So the excess consideration of 700 crores over net assets represents goodwill, which is not amortized but tested annually for impairment. Now, goodwill is not amortized. Under Ind AS, goodwill is not amortized, but it has to be tested annually for impairment. Unlike other intangibles, which needs to be tested for impairment only when certain conditions arise, because they are amortized. So the 700 crores cannot be expensed immediately and must be capitalized as goodwill. That is the first step. On acquisition, it becomes capital goodwill on acquisition. From an audit perspective, they must verify that the purchase price allocation has been done based on reasonable valuation methods which are tested, and then year after year also evaluate impairment for goodwill. So those are the things which come up from the reporting perspective on the same transaction. From a competition law perspective, the acquisition of Delhi vertical system raised CCA concern about market dominance. So what disclosures and approvals were required? Now we saw that over a period, this company has become a dominant player. One of the reasons is also acquisition of Delhi vertical systems. So under the competition law, what kind of disclosures and approvals were required was the key thing to look at. So the indicative answer goes like this: the Competition Act, right? The prior approval is required from the Competition Commission of India since the acquisition could cause appreciable adverse effect on competition due to market dominance. Appreciable adverse effect on competition due to market dominance. So how do you go about doing it? A detailed form to notification will have to be filed with CCI, right? Because the combination involved a horizontal overlap and potential dominance concerns. That is, both were in lift manufacture. One is going to acquire, so it's going to be a horizontal overlap. So together they could become a dominant player. So in view of that, a lot of information and a specific form too will have to be filed with CCI for them to assess. Based on all that, CCI will conduct a detailed competitive assessment focusing on market share, entry barriers, potential impact on consumers before they grant approval. In this case, of course, they got the approval and the merger happened. But this is the process they had to go. From an indirect tax perspective, Elevated Corp transferred inventory from Mumbai plant to Chennai plant post the merger. So in such cases, is GST applicable on stock transfers? One needs to consider all this also in planning this thing. So the key topics to consider are ISD registration, cross charging, input tax credit, etc. Now, ISD registration is not applicable in this case. It's not for stock transfers. ISD is used only for distribution of input service credit and not for movement of goods. Stock transfer between Mumbai and Chennai plants, because it is from one GST number to another, is considered as separate distinct persons under GST and will require cross charging at open market value. GST paid in Mumbai on transfer can be claimed as input credit in Chennai plant. So this is how you have to deal with it, and the systems will have to be put in place to handle such things. Now, there was also an ethical dilemma they had to deal with. A former owner of an acquired company requests continued use of old brand for 2 years. She says, for 2 years, old brand, let's continue. Should Elevate Corp agree or not? Right? What are the facts to be considered there? Brand dilution, what contract ethics are there, what stakeholder management requirement is there, is what needs to be looked at. Sometimes these things happen. In case you continue the old brand for a period, it may dilute the Elevate Corp's brand equity and create market confusion. Now, you yourself sell Elevate Corp and also Delhi Vertical, or you sell Elevate Corp and Chennai lifts, both. How does the same person sell two different things? Which brand do you push? And what you say is the difference between the brands. So, having this is always a very, very careful thing which needs to be dealt with. And it can only be for a integration period generally. Otherwise, you have to have a very clear strategy of dual branding. Like some companies have dual branding and have continued dual branding. Any person permission should also be governed by clear contractual agreement. So either as part of the business purchase arrangement or the merger arrangement or something like that, it has to be very clearly agreed how and why it is being done, what is the duration, what kind of controls will be in place, etc. Then, along with that, there has to be a balancing of various interests. What is the former promoter's interest? What is the customer perception which can happen? What is the investor's expectation? All this needs to be balanced. And also, there has to be some communication to effect that clear. So, these are things which needs to be considered in doing certain change like that. Now, This is a very interesting thing. This is what I was telling you. I will also come to it later. Acquisition with a liability shield. Now, in 2018, Elevate Corp entered into an agreement to acquire Pioneer Elevators Private Limited, a well-known Indian elevator company with strong install base of over 15,000 units. So it had already sold 15,000 elevators, right? And as I was mentioning, most of these elevators will continue to be serviced by the same company. So there will be AMC contracts. During due diligence, Elevate Corp's legal and risk teams identified significant latent liabilities. What is a latent liability not seen in the surface? Older elevators of pre 2000 models were still under maintenance contracts. There were some past incidents and pending litigations. What are the past incidents? Basically, elevator drop, elevator fall. Elevator fall is the biggest risk which an elevator company can face. One elevator falls, it creates so much of reputational damage and so much of litigation. There could be significant demand. It's like air crash, right? It affects the reputation of the and the people's trust in the safety of the equipment in which they have to go up and down. They also found there were non-compliances with updated safety codes in some of the legacy units. That is, some of the old elevators which were put out. There was non-compliance with safety codes. As safety codes have been updated, this has been not migrated to that. Now, what should Elevate Corp do to protect itself and protect the brand, etc.? Should Elevate Corp acquire the entire business and inherit these liabilities or structure the deal to isolate the risks? This was the big question mark. So, what were the identified risks? There's a product liability, potential claim from past elevator malfunctions or accidents. That's a big no-no in this thing because it can affect your reputation significantly. There were contractual obligations, long-term maintenance contracts with unclear liability clauses. For the past, they've entered into like that. Reputational risk, any future incident could damage Elevate Corp's brand, not only in India, globally. They will say Elevate Corp's lift failed, but actually it would have been a lift manufactured by Pioneer long back. But today, if it falls, it will carry your brand. Elevate Corp's lift failed. The financial risk is unquantified potential payout, insurance claims, and also, like I said, there were non-compliances with safety code, compliance upgrade costs. Looking at it from a legal and regulatory review, under Indian Contract Act, successor liability may apply in asset acquisition. So if you buy the company and the business, successor liability, you also take over the liability which is there on the assets. All the lift liability may come to you. Consumer Protection Act also imposes strict liability for service deficiencies, whether it is by you or by Pioneer earlier. Factories Act and elevator regulations require safety upgrades for older lifts, which we saw were not done in some of the cases in the past. Due diligence finding was that about 30% of Pioneer's install base were pre 2000 models with high risk profiles. This was the risk assessment coming from this thing. So, what was the structured deal done and how did they ring fence? Elevate Corp acquired only the manufacturing facilities, new product IP and technology, workforce, because they need the workforce, right? And brand name for new installations. For new installations. What they excluded, servicing business for pre 2010 elevators completely excluded. So, no old servicing will be done by them. Anything which was manufactured before 2010 will be not serviced by Elevate Corp. They are not taking over the contracts also. Existing maintenance contracts for older models not taken over. Obviously, related liabilities and any pending litigation not taken over. So the pioneer elevators, who are the original owners, retained service division for legacy elevators, all existing maintenance contracts, responsibility for past liabilities, and license to use the pioneer name for servicing only. So pioneer became from a manufacturer to just servicing for the past. They can continue to do it, and they can continue to make money from it, lose money from it, meet the losses if any, etc. Then they also agreed. Obviously, you don't want it to be open-ended. No? Elevate Corp provided technical support under a fixed fee agreement to support them to this thing. They also entered into a non-compete clause for new installations. Then they clearly separated the brand by calling it as Pioneer Service versus Elevate Corp products. So product business became theirs, service was left with them. So if there is a failure for the past, they are responsible and it does not come on to this. So there was a ring fencing which was done to ensure that deal was done in the right way to this thing. Take care with all protections. And what were the implementation and operational challenges? There could be customer confusion, explaining different entities for product and service. Workforce allocation. How do you separate manufacturing and service technicians? Manufacturing guys will be in Elevate Corp, service technicians will be for Pioneer. How do you do knowledge transfer, ensuring service teams could maintain older models going forward? Also, the risk of brand dilution, as we discussed earlier, right? What mitigation actions were taken? Create a clear customer communication protocols. So they had a story to two entities, etc. Then they also implemented a 2-year transition support agreement to ensure that the upgradations for safety code, etc., are slowly done during that period. They established a joint oversight committee to see that the implementations were being done properly and the risks were being run down. They also went and purchased runoff liability insurance for pre-acquisition risks. So they took additional insurance to ensure that pre-acquisition risks were separated. In the financial arrangements, accordingly with all this, they also adjusted the price for the downward estimated liability. A service royalty fee paid to Elevate Corp for technical support. As I said, Elevate Corp will give the technical support for improving the service. For that, there will be a royalty fee paid. Then there was a clearly defined cost sharing arrangement between the companies. Now, with this, we are coming to the questions on MCQ. And after that, if there are any further questions, also we can take. I think we will have a few minutes. So, essentially, what we saw in this again, as I told you, is a classic case of a practical group, how they built in India, how they dealt with certain risks when they grew, and how it all has multiple facets in which one needs to look at. So generally what happens in all transaction matters, there are multiple facets to always look at and address. That is something we need to keep in mind. Okay, now let's look at the MCQs. MCQ 1 is type of integration. Elevate Corp's acquisition of Mumbai lifts is an example of whether it's a horizontal integration, vertical integration, conglomerate diversification, or forward integration. Now, Elevate Corp's case is clearly a horizontal integration, because it is looking at an acquisition where similar businesses are coming together. A is also into lift, B is also into lift, both are joining together. So it's a horizontal integration. Just to give a this thing, if A was into lifts and B was into making, say, sensors for the lift, then it will be a vertical integration. Now, if A was into lifts and it was trying to diversify by buying a company which was into, let's say, manufacturing of some engineering product, to ensure that their whole this thing is not dependent only on infrastructure boom, but protect itself from the vagaries of infrastructure sector by getting into something that is a diversification. Forward integration would be a case where a steel manufacturing entity which was producing steel sheets used largely for lift acquires a lift company so that it can do forward integration. Now, from a goodwill calculation perspective, if net identifiable assets are 1800 crores and purchase consideration is 2500 crores, goodwill is either 700 crores, 4300 crores, 300 crores, or none. We saw this earlier, right? So we all know that it is looked at already as 700 crores. Now, here the key thing to understand is it's net identifiable assets. It's not the book value of assets, right? Now, under Ind AS 103, when an acquisition is happening, there is what's known as a purchase price allocation, which is done. So, essentially, all the assets which are acquired and the liabilities which are acquired as part of the business acquisition are valued at their fair values using different methods. And in that process, certain intangible assets which were earlier not even recognized in books as a separate item may be surfaced now, like IP rights, maybe like some customer contracts. All that could surface. And after these are valued, if the consideration is still having a gap between the identified net assets and the purchase consideration, then the difference will be taken as goodwill. That is how the goodwill comes. The third is on FEMA compliance. Funding an acquisition through ECB requires approval from either the RBI, SEBI, Ministry of Corporate Affairs, or CCI. Now, an external commercial borrowing is more to do with foreign currency, and under FEMA, the approval is required from RBI. There is also a process whereunder certain ECVs are approved on an automatic route, and certain things require specific approval. But it's basically RBI, which is the entity which deals with foreign exchange management. On the GST on services, annual maintenance contracts for elevators are taxed under GST at 5% without ITC, 18% with ITC, 12% with ITC, or is it exempt? It is under the normal rates, 18% with ITC. So the company which is selling AMC contracts will charge 18%, but it can claim ITC and offset when it has to discharge its liability. So that is the thing, advantage. So whenever it is saying without ITC, it means that the entity which is selling the goods or services will charge the GST at that rate as prescribed, but it will not be eligible to claim any input tax credit on its inputs. So to that extent, it will be a complete extra cost which will come. Whereas in this case, because it is with ITC, there is a adjustment which is possible. The net impact of cash outflow is lower. On the fifth MCQ item is on post-acquisition compliance and strategy. Now, after Elevate Corp's acquisition of Delhi Vertical System, right, which of the following is not a mandatory compliance or strategic action required within a year? We discussed about DBS earlier, so it's specific in that context. Which of the following is not a mandatory compliance or strategic action required within the first year? Filing of CCI 4 for combination notice with the Competition Commission of India, conducting a goodwill impairment test under Ind AS 36, re-registering all service content under GST with revised entity details, integrating DVS workforce without any restructuring to ensure cultural harmony. Integrating DVS workforce without any restructuring to ensure cultural harmony. So, neither a mandatory compliance nor a strategic action, which is required within 1 year. Which one of those it is? Integrating DVS workforce without any restructuring to ensure cultural harmony. Now, this is not what is required, right? This is not mandatory, while workforce integration is it may be important. Restructuring or role alignment is often necessary and legally permissible under labor laws. Cultural harmony is a strategic goal and not a statutory requirement. So, this is not a mandatory compliance which will be required. Whereas A is required, CCI mandates post acquisition filing if certain thresholds are met, and delays can lead to penalties. B is also required. Ind AS 36 requires annual impairment testing of goodwill. C is also required because GST law requires amendment of registration for transferred business. Contracts need updating for input tax credit continuity. So these three are required, whereas the fourth is not a mandatory one. With that, we are coming to the end of this presentation. And as I was mentioning, these two materials will be made available on the BOS site. I'll be sharing. I've already shared copies to the BOS. They will be uploading it. Any other points from the BOS, please? Anyone there from Board of Studies right now there?
Yes, sir.
Anything else you would like to add to the students? Otherwise, we are done with the session. We can close for the
Deepak,
day.
Deepak is not available today, so I am requested
Sure.
to please conclude the session.
Okay, thank you. So, students, with this, we come to the end of this session. Um, these papers are going to make a significant knowledge addition to you all, and I hope these case studies are giving you some directions as to what kind of things you could be looking at. All the best for your exams, and thank you. Have a nice weekend. Thank you. With that, we can close for the day. Thank you.
Ashok ji, yes, sir. Good night, sir.